Christopher David Mitchell, welcome.
Thanks so much.
We are, yeah, we're live, so we'll get going. And you were just
Yeah.
telling me about Google and your unique name. I guess my name's unique. The problem I have with mine though is that it's hard to spell, so people can
Is
type it
it
in if they hear it.
Whedon? Wed
Yeah, Wedden. It would be
Whedon?
like Vaden, if something like that. If it was because it's a German name,
Oh,
but
right.
yeah, it's quite unique. I think there's not many people in Germany that have it either. So yeah, I have thought about changing it, but I've kind of stuck with it for some reason.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah. So what have I got? Like how? Yeah. So how did I? I'm kind of we're kind of jumping in here because I don't know. Just to let the people watching this know, I don't know you. We've never met. We've spoke a bit on Facebook briefly, and obviously I've watched some of your content on there, and you've come across a few of my videos. But other than that, we are kind of diving in this uh, new afresh.
Yeah,
Um,
that's cool though. Well, we've had a bit of the Facebook banter and we've got some mutual friends like Brett Manning, I think, or whatever, who we'll get into in a bit, I'm sure. But yeah, it's the vocal coach thing though, isn't it? Sometimes once you're in the same circles, and we're both in and around London.
oh right, are you? How? Where did you say you are
I'm
now?
just outside of London, but I do teach in central London, just near Selfridges.
Oh
So
great.
we can always continue this geek out with a beer. Uh,
That would be awesome. Selfridges, is that West London? I'm just guessing.
that's Bond Street, like really.
Okay, great. What have you got a studio there, or you teach at
I
a
teach
college,
at
or?
the music studios, so it's just so handy at the moment. It's just so central. So it's literally just off Oxford Circus, say.
Mm,
The guys there are really cool, so I teach there at the studios there.
nice. And my teaching is online and at home. I get students coming here a little bit who are live nearby, but most of my students seem to be out of this country at the minute.
Yeah,
A lot of them in
that has
America.
happened to me in the past, but I think that's because you've got that the YouTube thing. Obviously, then that's the amazing thing about vocal cord. Just 20 years ago, it was only in your little area. Now, if you're on YouTube like you are and doing well on the internet, then it doesn't really matter where you're at anymore, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think where I got started with learning to sing and all that was with Singing Success, and all of that's based in America. So I probably
Yeah.
pick a lot of the people I pick up are through people that are interested in all that stuff. So, um, uh, yeah. So how did you get started in singing, and then how did you get started in teaching Christopher David Mitchell?
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, so this I'll try and cut this
Yeah,
story
obviously,
short.
briefly, we want to kind of see if you can summarize it a little bit. But
I'll try and summarize this one in like 3 minutes, but it is a story. But anyway, the basics of the singing was that I went to drama school. I was always into the West End type stuff.
mm,
Um, Came out and then worked pretty well. Did some tours around like America, around Europe. Anyway, and plodded along doing that. So did well with sort of London shows, tours. And then it got to a certain age. It was about 5 years ago, and I was doing really well. I was doing great. Had a great agent. Just done a few West End gigs,
mm,
and then I got ill, like really ill, and I had to stop it all. And my whole life sort of got turned upside down with that. To be honest, I haven't actually released the real health thing ever. But I'm going to next year. But for now, we'll just leave it at that a tiny bit, just to say that then that was the switch where I sort of went into being a coach because I was sort of told, you're going to spend this amount of time at home and not able to work and this, that, and the other. And then
uh,
first you go, oh God. And of course, I'd been living the life of the performer on the road and out there, and it was a total change. And anyway, briefly, just through that was when I started playing piano from scratch,
mm,
turned to my absolute passion of the voice, started doing everything I could, which was Skypes with teachers in America, whatever. And I basically just went on this mission to keep my mind focused through the illness of reading every vocal book and doing it. And then I was working a lot with the Singing Success lot, Jason Catron, Brett, and then was taking Skypes with Justin Stoney at New York Vocal Coaching. We became really good friends, and over 4 years, we became really close. And then I started just writing the daily vocal tips. I said, "Oh, I know you guys at New York Vocal Coaching do the daily vocal tips." I was like, "There's 10 I just wrote yesterday. What do you think of them?" And it went down pretty well. And then one thing turned to another, basically, and ended up being their UK associate, which was great.
Mm.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, well, apart from that was a year and a half ago or something. And then since then, and this is the end of the story, come on, don't worry. Since then, yeah, I decided to go off on my own and do my own thing in London. And that was a really hard decision. And I absolutely love Justin and very grateful. But I realized that I realized I was like this creative person, and I actually wanted the hard road of going it on my own a bit. It was actually a bit too easy just getting his offer and everything. I actually wanted to go and have the journey on my own of, well, doing things like this. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
yeah. So now I'm not with New York Vocal Coaching, and been going in London teaching that studio, and it's been going great. And I've had a great year with it, building up the clients, and I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed the journey. I think it was it was a good decision with that.
Yeah, it's very nice to. It's a different thing to just be setting up on your own to if you kind of join into an already established business, and it's nice. The sense of control is nice, but then also the sense of okay, I've got to kind of do this all off my own back is obviously more responsibility. But so did you do any vocal technique and actual formal stuff before, when you were younger, when you were when you were learning to sing, before you got ill? Like, how much had you got into technique and stuff? Was it all new to you, and you just learned kind of
Oh no,
naturally,
so
or?
I mean, I'd done 3 years of singing at drama school, and we had a lot of teachers there. They were mainly a still based,
Yeah.
the Joe Still model. But actually, I was probably always going to be a coach anyway. It was a real moment to make me a coach. But even when I was 23, I was in America, and someone said, "Hey, check out this Brett Manning Singer Success thing." And that blew my mind at the time, because it was so different to everything I'd ever learned. So I was already a vocal geek, but that just got ramped up to the max when I was ill and forced not to perform, and forced to then pursue that. And now I think it's all for the best. So, but no, over the years it's been a still, speech level singing, some of complete vocal technique as well. For New York Vocal Coaching, I actually taught a week's masterclass in Copenhagen, and yeah, so I had a few of the complete vocal technique people at me, which was great. And I've been to Italy as well, and the more you go around all these different countries, the more I find that everyone's got something great to say. And so my thing is now incorporating it's the whole thing, it's the whole experience that makes you. It's every teacher you've been to, it's every country you've been to. Approach with that.
Yeah, that kind of that takes us on actually to the first thing that I put down, which was just talking about your methods and your techniques and stuff. You kind of covered that briefly there. That's I found what's as well is whilst there's obviously differences between the details of a lot of methods, broadly speaking, they're all trying to get people to roughly the same spot, and also just this sense of at some point you kind of have to step forward and build your own understanding of all this stuff that is partly like you can explain, obviously, and you want to be able to break it down very simply, but then also this sense of trying to go beyond to understand the real deep nuance of what you're doing. It's at some point you kind of go a little beyond a lot of this stuff where it all kind of, my sense is that everyone's really trying to get to the same spot, which is basically like that free kind of natural sound that whilst we can kind of mess around with a little bit, darken up, brighten up, depending on what we want to do stylistically, it's that kind of just efficient, easy spot that doesn't sound kind of off, if that makes sense.
So true, and they've all got their own little thing, though. I think they've all got their tweaks, and they've all got things that some of them don't talk about. But as a sweeping general, yeah. And also the terms are very similar, so it doesn't matter what. It's like being in a different country with a different language. So it still talk about thin fold, thick fold. Speech level would talk about levels of compression, and then there's the curbing overdrive thing, which to my mind is something similar, and it's all variations of that. But really, when you go around, they're all talking about the same thing, just in different ways. And then, but the problem is curiosity kills people. So when they go, oh my God, what's this curbing thing? And then you spend a month down the line, you're right, oh, I've been doing that for years. I just didn't know this term. But curiosity kills people, I think. So they go, what's this neutral larynx? What's that curbing? What's this thin fold? What's this? So I think, it can be difficult, but really once you do go around, you realize, they're talking about mainly the same things.
Yeah, and there's, I like the idea of, can you make that sound? If you can, then, that's kind of all you need to be able to do. Well, at least can you make it, in a way that that's going to be not detrimental to your voice over the long term. But I want to the basic principles can sing a tone. Yeah, so I'm guessing that when you talked about your health, it wasn't necessarily to do with your voice. So have you had? You might have had experience with students and things where I guess I'm asking, what are your kind of go-to basic kind of core concepts that you feel like, if I can get this across to a struggling student, this is going to lead them in a path that's going to kind of help them.
Yeah, or core things technique-wise, I do as well.
Yeah.
Just before we go on, though, I will say that the voice, my body was ill, and so the voice is ill. So the blessing and the curse of the voice is we're a human instrument. We're always carrying it around with us. So if your body is that bad, the voice is going to go. So I actually really had to think about technique, because I was that ill that my falsetto completely went. I remember when I went to Justin, I just couldn't make one note of falsetto. And no one believes me on this now, because I'm a bit healthy again. I've worked on it. But actually, I'm going to bring out my old singing lesson voice recordings and put them on. So I literally went from nothing when I was that ill. The voice just went. It just would.
So you had to rebuild, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Health and body and mind as well. That was a big thing. But in terms of what I teach, I'm very much in the belief at the moment of muscle isolation work. And it's you being in control of your voice. The argument for me always is, if you have to do something, then you're struggling. If you have to get louder to hit that note, if you have to raise the larynx to hit that note, if you have to spread the mouth, otherwise it doesn't come out, yada, 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 then you're not in control 100% of your voice, it's in control of you. Whereas there's nothing wrong with spreading if you know what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with raising your larynx if you know what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with anything if you know what you're doing. Even false folds, as someone like Chester Bennington would account to. But there has to be a fundamental foundation of the muscles working independently. So, i.e., if I'm, I'll just sing some impression, even though this is probably sing badly, but if I'm just doing something simple and I'm just doing sorry, keyboard's just turning on.
Yeah, take your time, don't worry.
No, come on. So if I'm going like, and I have to raise the larynx, but if I just keep everything still, and then just literally, then the CT muscles had to stretch because no one else was doing the work.
Yeah.
So I'm all for that. And the same with, and that's the same principle across the board with, even with things like twang. which is that sort of nay, 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 nasty sound. A lot of people do it and they do like nay, 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 and they really scrunch their face up. But then, ones if you leave everything be and you try to make the bright sound internally, that's when you really get the work. So when you can let the muscles work independently, I find then that's the route to sort of vocal mastery and being in complete control of your voice. I mean, it's easier said than done, and it takes time, but that would be what I strive for with my clients.
Yeah, that is such good information that you've just put across there. If you can keep everything still, like a na 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 na, you, whatever it is, keep it
Yep.
on an for example, you're in trouble as soon as you can't do that. As soon as you hear that widening, even a smidge, because a lot of people that sing very well will widen just a smidge, and it's like they can get away with it. But if you can keep it exactly on an or whatever vowel you're picking, however it is, keep everything still and just stretch it out, and then you can really start to. It basically trains in isolation, because if you can do that, it forces you to isolate one muscle group and
So
just.
then, that's not me swearing at you, by the way. I just realised they're doing the vocal folds, and also I think a lot of people go like, high larynx is bad because the chords get tight. But then if you've got muscle isolation here, and you can go from and you can do everything, then you can do that again any larynx position.
Yeah, because what happens is if you've got high larynx and you are used to getting wide, that high larynx will push. If
Yeah.
you can, if you are used to staying narrow and staying on the right shape, the same shape through there, it will thin out just the same way. But what usually happens with people that are yelling is on an they'll have a and as soon as you get on a nay or a na 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 na, it's the mouth gets isolated. It's not thinning out and going into the right spot. Na 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 na, where it's staying in that right blended spot, however you want to describe it. But ultimately, it does come down to isolate your ability to isolate muscle groups. When I started, literally, I had no isolation between any of these muscle groups. So everything I did was just a big clumpy mess. And over the years, as I've chipped away at this and got better, now I'm able to just do one thing at a time. And I think when you talk about isolation, really, a lot of the time it's can you just do one thing at a time? Just change one thing. Yeah, just change the pitch and not change anything else. That is harder than people think a lot of the time.
Yeah.
For some singers, sorry to carry on, but for some singers that's quite easy. I get one student, you give them a vowel, change the pitches, no problem. They'll do it perfectly the first time because they've got that isolation. But someone that doesn't, and it shifts, it's tricky to because really you're trying to establish new motor skills, which requires you to let go of the old ones, to resist the pull of the old ones, and establish a new pattern in the mind, which takes time, and that's why adjusting this stuff can be quite tedious and frustrating, because the that establishing new motor skills on top of old ones that need to dwindle away. The mind's got two jobs. It's like I'm trying to erase that old pathway and add something new in that's more efficient and less cluttered. And that battle, that you really feel that depending on how drastic the change is. Now, for me, it was extremely drastic, so that battle went on for a long time. But for a lot of other singers, most of them, it's not as drastic. You know, there's a battle, but it's over a period of a few months or something.
Yeah, I mean, muscle memory and neurological pathways and all this are real strong. Habits are real strong in people. But yeah, no, totally agreed with what you just said on all that. And then the joy after that is to not stay balanced, because being quite balanced is a little bit boring, you know. Then the joy is, I mean, and you've talked about this, is how much can you get away with, sort of, because then you've got complete control. So then when you're on your sort of matinee show, your morning audition, you can do it in that gear, and then when you're full out on that recording, then you know how to press in, back off, and stuff like that. You know how to. You've got all compression levels in there as well. I think that's a huge thing. I talk about decompression as much as I talk about compression. I really do. Yeah, maybe that's just because I've got a lot of gym goers these days. Everyone's trying to look good for Instagram and everyone's tight. I've got to do the other way. Gotta get the Michael Jackson voice out a bit, to help free up some flexibility in there.
Yeah, because
I'll talk about decompression a lot.
yeah, if you've got a lot of squeeze and you can't back off of it, it can just be a painful trap because you're just going to inhibit the range so much. Because the range is kind of a compromise in a sense. If you compress less, you're going to feel more flexibility and more freedom. And as you compress more, you've got to work a bit harder to get through there. So if all you know is that, a lot of squeeze, then there's nowhere, you're always going to feel like, I can't quite get there. There's so few options. I think that's one thing that's hard to get across to learning singers is as you get better, your knowledge base broadens so much that you can do certain things and you understand certain things, but the reason you understand them so well is because you understand a lot of other things, if that makes sense. Like you can compress and squeeze a lot and get really powerful because you understand how to back off of that and how it fits into your voice in a broader context. Do you know what I mean? Whereas when you're in that narrow space as a learner, it feels like you kind of just trapped there almost.
Yeah, and I've always generally sang pretty well, so apart from that time, but I knew so much, I was able to get myself out the hole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
And I still could these days. If I had to sing a particular song, I would know how to prepare and sort it out. But yeah, I think you're right as well. And every coordination helps every other coordination. So the more
Exactly,
options
yeah.
you've got, the better.
Yeah.
If you haven't got the falsetto, you haven't got your maximum possible stretch potential of that cricothyroid muscle. If you haven't got the really thick TA, then you're not going to be able to really add a bit of that when you really want some really rocking sounds. If you haven't got the ability for the vocalis to squeeze, then there's just all these things. And also I find the voice very systematic as well. I will take people up to like flageolet notes, and I find that that's always a direct reflection of how high that potential is. An octave below is always when they crack on that belt. It's always a direct reflection. So if you think about people's lowest notes normally are about, men's lowest note might be about a G, might be a G sharp on average. That's always 2 octaves above where they belt crack. And you find it's very systematic because it's like guitar. When you go down it's always then an octave, isn't it? I mean, guitar better. So point is, when you work out the falsetto, the mixed belt comes, the belt lightens up, you get access, and it all is part and parcel of the whole thing.
Yeah, and it gives you a sense of of where to go. One thing, as you compress more and sing through your range, if you haven't got that extension with some lighter compressions, then there can just be this sense of I don't actually mentally know where the next note is. But if you've got something lighter already established there, you have this sense of a pathway that you can follow, even though you're on a different compression level. You have a sense of the direction the voice naturally wants to lead, and that helps so much. Just having in your head a direction, and I kind of when I say that. I'm kind of basing that on when I started myself. I had really nothing much above like middle C, that wasn't pushed, and so in my mind, literally above a certain point, like an E or an F, there just wasn't any concept of what that would feel like, if that makes sense. So that's kind of an extreme example, but just as you develop one sound, like you say, it feeds into the others because it gives you this sense of there are parts of singing that are universal regardless of whether you're singing on heavy compression or light compression or whatever. There are certain things that are the same. You're having to do really regardless of the type of sound you're making, and it helps you to latch onto those broader skills that aren't as that aren't reliant on squeeze or no squeeze. It's they're more like broader, if that makes sense. I guess I'm thinking about details, levels of compression, and then underneath that a broader kind of more basic skill set of just adjusting the pitch, understanding what needs to happen and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
but one guy I was thinking of, and I can't remember his name, was that famous winner of that of Idol in America. Let me just get him up. Idol winners. You'll know him. He's very Adam Lambert. That's his name.
He
Um,
actually did second, I think.
yeah. So oh, did he? Okay.
Second for me to go.
Yeah. So he's a good. Just to go back to what you were saying, he's a good example of singers that will adjust their technique a little bit depending on the time of day or what they've got to do for the rest of the day. I've seen him do radio shows on YouTube early in the day where he sings on pretty light coordinations,
Yeah.
and then later on during a show he'll sing on heavier compression levels and stuff. And that's because he's got such a great knowledge of what he's doing that he's able to do
And he's
that.
got options. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
about. That's exactly right.
yeah.
Because we've just gone full circle, which is amazing. Yeah, but he doesn't have to do anything to hit the note. He chooses to hit the note how he wants, on
Yeah.
the compression level he wants, on the power he wants, and stuff like that.
And a lot of singers are more leaning towards they can kind of only do it in one way more, and so they kind of end up, on those harder days where the voice isn't feeling it, they're not sure what to do because they can't back off the compression much,
And
and
that's when
so
nerves kick in. Is it going to come out? Is it going to come out? Am I going to hit that
yeah,
note? And
which
then you
then
start honey watering to the max, and you start getting your papa cow out and steaming and all this, and you just go, oh, this just isn't worth it. I cannot live a life.
yeah, because once you get in that cycle, it
Yeah,
gets scary
the
because
technique takes you out of that cycle.
yeah, the understanding, the broader knowledge and the technique and the reliability is what allows you to get away from, like you say, all those kind of things that you hear singers talk about. Even very successful singers. I worked just on a show in London a few years ago, like an Alice in Wonderland show, and a lot of the actors there, they had so many things that they had to do throughout the day to get their voice, quite, and they don't speak before blah, 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 and then they'll have to drink this and eat that, and it's like this it gets insane, the level of like just detail, and you think you don't actually, none of that's going to make anywhere near as, it might help a little bit, but it's not going to make as much different as if you've got really solid technique established, because if you have all that, you realize all that stuff is, maybe it can supplement, but it can't replace the causes of the issues and the causes of the problems. If you can't sing consistently, generally speaking, it's going to be your technique that maybe is like 95% there, but there's something that's a little bit off that you haven't noticed. Yeah, that's great information. Right, yeah, let's move on to. I was interested actually because I saw a photo of you on your Facebook with David Phelps, who is a guy that I got into through Brett Manning, and love what he does. Spent many hours watching one particular. Let me tell you the one I've watched thousands of times on YouTube.
Probably
Um,
Holy Night.
no, it's not. It's No More Night.
No
It's
more night.
on,
He likes his nights.
yeah, it's gone Gay the Vivo, 4 million hits.
Gate the vocal band. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched that performance many times.
Mm.
But yeah, I love the guy. He's awesome. I was interested in how you met him and what kind of things you might have spoke about, or you may not have spoke about anything. But I just was interested in and whether or not you're a fan, etc.
Well, yeah. He's got to be my number one singer. Actually, it was when I was in America through American friends who were like, "You've got to check this guy out." So actually, it was like Dave Phelps and the Brett Manning thing all happened at once. So that was like 23 years old, and then so I've seen him 4 times live, Phelps, and the first time, me and a few geeky voice friends flew over to Ireland to see him. And then the other times were in London. But the last time was when he sort of it was like a friend of a friend who'd got the producing gig, and I just called him up basically and said, well done for getting the gig and this, that, and the other, and I love Phelps, and if there's any way I could help out. And so we met for a coffee, and one thing led to another again. And then I eventually ended up being assistant producer for his gig in London at the Indigo O2, and sort of helped, audition the choir and get the MD together and stuff like that. And then obviously just got to even just meet him and shake his hand and stuff properly as someone who was sort of working on the project. And that was a huge deal for me. Phelps is just an absolute vocal tank. He's just amazing. And again, so many options is the word of the day a little bit, but it's true, because when he was singing a whole set, he was on for at least 2 hours, 2.5 hours. It was so varied. If you've got this amazing balanced voice and there we go, and you do that for 2 hours, you're going to switch off. He's got amazing low notes. He's got the thickness. He's got amazing float that's still connected. He's got disconnects. He's got an amazing mix. And also, most of all, is he just sings it from the soul as well. And that's one thing that I think with my drama school acting background as well, I love technique, but really, I think it's all about some sort of emotional human connection. I'll just say this. When I was teaching a seminar in Birmingham earlier this year, and I was teaching 4 hours on vocal technique and style and stuff like that. And I must have got 2.5 hours down, and I'd done all these diagrams and the resonance and this is what's happening. And then I said, right, now no one cares about technique. That doesn't matter. And they're all like, oh. And of course, I said that for a bit of effect. But what I meant was, when the average person is sitting there, they are not thinking about, oh God, his larynx was a bit high, or his vocal folds or whatever. They just want to be moved emotionally as well. And Phelps believes, this is why the gospel singers are so good. Phelps believes every word he says, or at least you feel it. And so that's what makes Phelps as well so special. And why I love a lot of gospel singers, because no one believes it like the gospel singers sometimes. West End people, they sort of believe it in a character, but no one believes it when Phelps sings No More Night like Phelps.
Yeah, I know. I like what you say, because your background's a bit different to mine, and I have a lot of exposure through the where I work at a venue, and to different styles of singers. One thing I think sometimes in the musical theatre stuff they can lack some of that, because everything they do is in character. It's less them, it's less authentic. Whereas typically in contemporary music and someone like David Phelps, it's more themselves singing than it is a character. And I think he's a good example of a great marriage between technique and being open and himself. And I think, I found this is something that this year I've tried to work on more in what I'm doing, but I found that it's something that's kind of been married with my ability to let go of the technique, which is dependent on the how good the technique is. It's this weird relationship. I feel like the reason that David can be so authentic a lot of the time is because he doesn't have to think about the technique.
Got amazing technique, yeah.
And it's
I
like,
said that flippantly with the Birmingham thing. Obviously, technique is important, and technique, as we said with the honey and the and everything, it allows you to go nail it. Because if you're on stage and you're thinking, is this note going to come out? You're buggered.
Yeah.
But if you're on stage and you know it's there because you've done all the background work, then you can be authentic in the moment, whether it's the text for Shakespeare, or whether it's the text for the West End, or whether it's No More Night.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. All I'm saying is, at the end of the day, most audience members want that. So the way to that is technique. But that's in the end what they'll remember. They won't remember that he hit that top D. Not really. They'll remember the experience it was and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. And I guess I wasn't really diminishing what you were saying. I was just kind of talking about this relationship between a singer's ability to let go and connect, and that relationship to the technique with that. And I do think that ultimately, you can be an average technician as a singer, and if you are completely committed to the vocal and emotionally open, that is a much better situation to be in than a very technical singer who is emotionally closed and is not certain, I guess. That certainty is I feel like is a lot of the time half the battle with singers. And if you can have consistent technique and still be uncertain, and it can just kill everything. It's and Yeah, it's funny. I always when I think about what am I watching in a great singer, it's this combination of just there's no fear, and I say combination. Ultimately, it's an absence of fear is a lot of the time what you are really connecting with. I feel like,
Yeah.
and that absence of fear, you know, if they are technically very very good, they can obviously push the boundaries further and not be scared. Because
Yeah.
you get a lot of great singers who aren't scared, but they're not necessarily technically pushing things very far. I mentioned a girl called Lucy Rose, just an English singer-songwriter. Very good singer, very skilled. You probably won't know her because she won't be on the radar of any singing coaches, but she's a good example of a lot of these successful singer-songwriters who aren't vocally, doing anything crazy, but what they do very well. They're open. You don't get the sense that they're scared and that they're anticipating, things going wrong. Um, and people will buy that, because it's well executed and it's done well. So
Well, put it this way, David Phelps is technically as well an unbelievable singer, but in the commercial pop world, he's hardly known at all.
yeah,
Like, fair enough, I know him and you know him, but if we had to compare him and I don't want to compare, but do you know what I mean? You can
yeah,
compare to nearly anyone who's selling out arenas, and they haven't got the ability. So then it must come down to so many other things as well, as we
yeah,
know in the music industry. I talk about it's technique, style, and soul. Style, I think, is probably even more important than technique in the pop world. I know that sounds weird. Not for longevity, but by style, turn on the radio in 3 seconds and it's Elvis, and it's
yeah,
Amy Winehouse, and it's Sia, and it's Sam Smith. And it doesn't matter if you like them or not, but if you've got that ability to be that memorable because you have either stylistic elements that are so memorable that you can't be forgotten or ignored, or people instantly know. Whereas I've been on panels all day from like 10 till 5 and heard singer after singer after singer who's technically proficient and this, that, and the other. And with all the will in the world, at the end of the day, you can't remember someone at 10 past 2 or something. And what you remember is someone who's really individual in their stylistic qualities and sounds very different. Like the first time the record labels would have heard Amy Winehouse or Sam Smith, they would have gone, this sounds a bit different. And I think that is super popular. So technique, style, and soul are my three things.
mm, yeah. And like you say, on top of that, you layer on other variables like, um, you know, uh, if somebody's born attractive or not, that can help.
Yes,
If
that can be
they,
the fourth. Yeah,
if they've
completely.
built the right relationships with various people or whatever it is, maybe they just got a bit of luck.
Yeah,
Maybe some technology came around at the right time that helped them. There's so many things
yeah.
that go beyond, how good a singer is technically, which is, a lot of the time what coaches are fixated on. But I think that what you say is great in the sense that I do think that it's important to be a singer that is different. Now, how different, that's the question, because obviously if you're completely out there, you're not going to have as much of an audience.
I
But
don't think that. No, I don't think you can be too different. I think the first time Elvis sung, everyone would have
mm.
gone, "What the hell? What the hell's this?" The first time Amy Winehouse did something, the first time I'm trying to
Some of them
think.
are pretty different. I mean, I'm thinking of Sia's quite unique. I
Just
mean,
better.
even Adele's quite unique in a sense.
Yeah.
She's kind of like
You know what, like, you don't get to that level, I don't think, by if you turn on the radio, it's Adele, it's
yeah,
Sam Smith. I think that is a must. And with 90% of singers, they're just doing technique, and so they're not exploring all these stylistic elements to make them an artist
yeah,
and make them unique. Some people have it God given as well, I will say. Some people do just have a unique voice and they're not even thinking about it. But
well,
with other
there's
people, I'll have to systematically work the style and we'll have to play around with so many elements. And then it'll be like, oh, I like that one, or I like that one.
yeah, there's a sense of, if you are the obviously, you know, the vocal cords you're born with, the space in your head that you're born with, all of that, that is going to impact your basic tone.
Yeah.
And you can't change that. There's no way around it. It's just what you're born with. And then there's obviously stylistic choices you can make that can make you sound different. And yeah, there's certainly a sense of, some people are born with a kind of just, I guess, a more rounded type quality that can just sound kind of cool. A lot of black singers tend to, I feel like, have some of that more natural inbuilt roundness to the sound. And I
Yeah.
think the technique can help with that, but I think basically they've just got slightly different structure in the bones and things, and that just leads them in that direction more. Um, and and so there's that, and then there's also, like you say, the stylistic stuff. And I guess when you were talking about that, what I'm thinking of is a lot of, say, I'm thinking about musical theatre singers that tend to be a little bit more straight and within the rules. They tend to be a little bit, I guess you could say, samey, or they can fall victim to that sameness. Whereas you probably get less of that in the pop world or the contemporary world. But then I will
Yeah.
say you tend to
100%.
get less, the quality of the technique you get in musical theatre is generally going to be it's going to be higher than pop. So there's like, it's an interesting thing actually, because I think what they learn in musical theatre, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I feel like they probably learn a better basic rule set of fundamentals. Whereas obviously a lot of contemporary singers are just basically on their own, learning by mimicking, and they kind of figure a lot of things out and maybe not so much of others. So there's more like mud in the water, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, and in musical theatre, you are playing a part. It's already a set style. It's already a set stylistic tool.
Yeah,
If I'm going for Aladdin, I've got to go, proud of your boy, I'll make you. I've got to be slightly high larynx. I can't go, proud of your boy, or whatever. I can't do something like, proud of your. They'll kick me out. The MD would go nuts. He'd say, no, you have to sing it like this.
yeah,
This is how we want it sung.
yeah,
Where pop, so when I'm teaching If I Loved You, it's a set recipe,
yeah,
pretty much. And then it will just be down to the singer's individual resonance from what they've naturally got. But the set mechanics of it will be pretty similar, because that's what the production team and the MD want. That's what they want the audience to hear the song, how they think it should be sung. Whereas pop is the complete opposite. Pop is, if you do what someone else has last done, you've lost.
yeah.
You
Well,
have to reinvent the wheel. You have to do something new, and at all costs, you have to be within 5 seconds. That's Carl Whedon singing.
yeah. Well,
Of
whoever
which
it
I
is.
loved one of your recent videos, because you did that and you sent it to Brett, and I think, or it was some video you put up, and it was Brett, and I saw it, and I mentioned to Brett that this is really good, and you took some song, I can't remember which one it was, and
Oh, probably the Whitney Houston one.
yes, the Whitney Houston one, yeah, and you created something really individual with it, and something different, and something that would be like, that's his version.
Yeah,
And that is
yeah,
the absolute goal with recording artists and pop, for sure.
yeah. And it's challenging to um, find that difference in, in a sea of singers. There's just so many singers out there. Can be hard to find something new. I feel like the best, most successful singers have kind of got this weird combination of, it almost sounds like you can hear the old influences, you can hear those old singers in what they're doing, but then they kind of have a unique twist on it. They have,
Yeah.
Adele's a good example of that. She sings like a lot of the You know, a lot of the Motown singers from the, I guess, 50s and 60s that are
Yeah.
known. But if you actually get into the details, she's kind of got her own thing as well. She doesn't quite do it the same way as they did.
And
So it's,
she's struggled in one aspect of her voice technically because I don't think she's got the mix that she should have, and she's got the natural flip. But she hasn't sorted out the technique. She's just gone, sod it, I'll just make that into something that's my style. So she's very known for that disconnect now. I'm not sure she could do it the other way, but she's gone with it, and she's gone, well, I mean, she should be style and technique, and she ran into a few issues. But the fact that she used one of her not weaknesses, but she still used it to the max and created something really cool with it.
yeah. And if you can do it, I guess, if you can do it healthily,
Yeah.
and it's different and new and unique, then you know there's no real issue there. Unfortunately, because she's had troubles. I mean, I think I feel for the girl because I think like I don't know where she's going to find don't know where she's going to find help, and you know,
Yeah.
once there's that much money involved, every man and his dog wants to help you, and like, how do you filter out the people that are going to actually help from the
It's
people
an
who?
easy fix, though.
It's
That's the
like,
funny thing about Adele. It's an easy fix.
yeah. I mean, I feel confused by a lot of what's happened with her because on some level I'm like, in my mind I feel like it makes sense what she's doing, but then I don't really understand because I see a lot of coaches talk about how she gets too wide and she belts and it's a bad example and things, and then I think, yeah, but like we were saying earlier, the problem is when you,
He hasn't got another option.
yeah, and also when, in my mind, I understand how she could sing that wide and never have any problems. And so, um, but like you said, it might be that there's some gap in her knowledge that's meaning that she's pushing a little bit here and there. But it's possible to do what she does healthily, I guess, is the thing I try and get across to people. And a lot of the information out there is of this sense of, oh, well, she needs to narrow everything down and she can't sing
No,
wide there because singing wide is dangerous.
I
And
would
I'm
have
like,
said that a few years back. Sorry, go on.
yeah, and then I know it's not the fact that she's singing wide. Now, singing wide is technically riskier because there's less margin for error. You can yell more easily if you don't understand the boundaries. But if you do, David Phelps is a good example. Wide open, like at the end of that No More Night, wide open.
His face is like that,
Yeah,
yeah.
just like
But his
like
larynx is
yeah,
probably fairly
yeah,
stable.
no
Otherwise,
strain.
that
It's
plus
total.
the high larynx would be too
Yeah.
of a thin sound, and he's got a big sound.
It's totally free what he's doing. The point is because he's technically so good, he can do it. Now you put 100 other singers up to sing that song, like 99 of them are gonna get it too wide up there, and it will push a little bit. Um, so it's just a total. It's yeah. I don't know singers like her. I think I almost feel for them because I think I don't know how they're going to find, you know, with all of those voices around them, dragging them this way, that way. Like, how are they going to find the
Yeah.
right help? Like, it's a bit tricky. I hope that she manages to get it together and sing consistently again.
If she found what we were saying earlier about every recipe helps every other recipe. Also, there's other stuff going on. I know she suffers with stress and anxiety, and obviously she has had a voice disorder. But if she found the area and the gear above that massive belty thing, because she's always belting to like CC sharp or BC or whatever.
Mm.
She sat around DEFF sharp, and she had to thin out, and she had to find that gear. It would thin out the belty gear before, and also she doesn't need to sing as loud. It's not the wideness that's causing the problem. It's blasting the air and the chords getting swollen by all this air and all this compression and all that volume. She's on a mic, use the mic. If she cut down the volume 20% and still stayed wide, she'd be fine, I think.
Mm. And I think what you were saying about just learning to thin out a bit higher,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that she could stay narrow through that bridge, and make sure that extension above that bridge was like consistent and always narrow, that would help a ton, because then she would never like. It's when you feel like you get into that ceiling and you don't know where you're going to go next that you get the problem. If in your practice you're going through that on even on a lighter coordination, on a narrow sound, so you know the pathway, you know where it needs to go to stay right, it becomes so much easier to sing on heavier compression levels without that sense of where do I go? Because I watched, like, one thing I watched, she's got this New York show that I've watched quite a lot, like Live in New York, she did last year, I think, or earlier this year, and it's amazing. There's like one song where it's like a cover song, and in the second half it goes up a key, and there's a few notes where she just gets a bit wide and pushes, but it's with her, I feel like she's like a 95 singer, as in like 90 to 95% of what she's doing is like spot on, and it's just the little 5% where she just gets a little bit off here and there, because she sings on such heavy compression. When she gets a little bit off, it can, if you're just singing on light sounds, you can afford to be 5% off and you're not going to hurt yourself. But if you're singing on compression like that, and it's going off even a little, it can really hurt you, because the chords are coming together hard. It can be much more,
that volume with that air as well.
yeah. And I think of singers like Bono from U2, who sung on heavy compression levels, and just didn't do it for that long because kind of some of the technique was off, and he's never really been a consistent singer. Not sung like he did in the 80s when they were kind of more up and coming, I guess you could say. But yeah, it's singing on heavy compression like that is challenging for various reasons.
Yeah, you've got to find that one extra gear above that's going to get the chords to just get that little bit more stretch and flexibility. Because at the moment she's staying thick, and the pitch is just going up, and she's just staying thick. You can always find that extra gear. So when you hear singers like Ariana Grande or whatever, or anyone, and everyone goes, "Oh God, her belt's great," or whatever, but hear how much her head voice is in there, all that area above. She's got every gear of flexibility in there to bounce off of, and I think that's. And Adele's, all her songs go up to like the same note, so she's always hitting that note.
Yeah,
that's what happens.
Yeah, and I think goes back really to what we were saying earlier on at the start, was this this sense of the more coordinations they all help each other. Like if you've got light, medium, and heavy through the different parts of your range, you've got options, and also you've got this broader pathway that you understand. Because heavier compression levels, they're just not going to go as high as easily as the lighter ones, and so you have to understand the compromise you're making, how that compromise fits into the broader context of your voice. That's how you can really extend full compression sounds as high as possible healthily, because you understand how that fits into everything more broadly.
I like saying lengthen, then strengthen.
Yeah.
Get flexible and light and soft and even breathy, and then let's come in from there. If she could have been on a top E, Adele, and hit this really light head voice, and then 20% louder, 20% louder, I guarantee she would have had a bit in the middle where she would have just gone flipped to that real strong gear. But if she could have found that 50-50 volume gear on them, then that would have sort of always sounded different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting, man. Have you just finishing
going
up?
on? This is great.
What time do you need to shoot, Chris?
No, mate. I have designated my time for this. I'm well.
Oh, sweet. Okay, well, we'll carry on. I've got probably another like 20 to 30 minutes, so we should be all right. Yeah, another singer who's actually very different to David Phelps, who I found through Brett Manning, is Phil Wickham, and you actually look a little bit like him. But
I think he is. I'll have to look him up.
Yeah, he's also a religious singer from America, but not of this type of style, more like modern stuff.
Okay.
And he's somebody I looked up to for a long time. Very, very good singer. He's had some technical issues actually with his voice as well, and he had to have a operation on his throat. But I love his approach. Just a real nice way he approaches what he's doing. Um, let's yeah. So this I was scrolling down your Facebook and came across this picture, and I actually have wrote a bunch on this recently before I found this, and I was interested in where you got it from and
Yeah.
if it's something you came up with. But I wanted to talk to you about it because it's something that we're going to have a lot in common with in terms of what we're trying to get across. But it's this little thing you had up, a picture of, and I can probably get it up actually on the video. What I'll do is I'll bring it up. But this you called it iceberg theory, or
Yeah, I mean, it
success
wasn't
iceberg.
yeah, the success iceberg. I mean, it wasn't my invention. It's sort of popular. It's going around. I think a friend of mine I saw share it, and then I just sort of thought, oh, that's good, and put it on my thing. Stole it from a friend who actually had gone through. I know she had actually gone through a health thing as well. So point is, she'd been through some sort of adversity in her life as well, and I think when you go through that, you do get a bit deeper thinking with some of these things. But no, I put that up. I think it was a client was mentioned to me something about social media or something like, I don't feel like I'm progressing or doing well, and I said, well, first of all, don't believe what you see on social media. You know, this is someone's highlight reel. This is the version that they want to put up of what's going on most of the time. And I think that causes a lot of problems sometimes with everyone thinking, oh God, maybe I'm not successful, maybe I'm not doing great. When people are really going for the social media and so I just shared that. That was my initial reason for it.
Yeah, well, just to fill people in, I'll put it up on the screen as well. But the concept is really this, that when you see somebody perform, or you see someone in day to day life, whatever it is they're doing, you're kind of you're seeing a result. You're seeing this kind of end game, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's very hard sometimes to understand the broader picture behind a story, behind someone's life. And let's take singing as an example. When you see a great singer, you kind of take it on face value. And going back to David Phelps, I watched him being interviewed and talking about growing up and his parents, and he was talking about when he was singing when he was younger and trying to get better, and saying that his dad would be very like open with him about when he was singing badly, when he was singing well, talking about his struggles coming up. It's easy to look at David Phelps and assume it was just given to him. What's harder is to go into some of the details, go into the story, and realize, like, okay, more than likely this dude was singing from a young age. He had, he was nurtured in the right direction with the right attitude, and he worked and worked and worked and worked through the formative years of his life. And all of that stuff that you don't see is what led to what you do see at the end. And I think, like, just this concept in general is really is a good one for people to understand, because it starts to get you more aware of when you're comparing yourself to others, you're not necessarily kind of seeing it as a zero-sum game. Like, for myself, as a learning singer, when I was especially, even in the last few years, when I was struggling a lot with my voice, trying to get, like, how do I get good at this? Like, how do I figure this out the way I want to? I was always looking at sometimes singers younger than me and understanding that I wasn't quite as good as them, but understanding, hang on a sec, I didn't start doing this really seriously till I was in like 22.
Right.
I've been piecing my voice together, slowly over the years, and from where I started was quite closed, quite scared, quite fearful. I had a long process of coming through that. So because I know that story, and when I see younger singers who are really good, I know not to make this direct comparison, because their story is going to be different to mine, and and it gives me this sense of I can make fairer comparisons in my mind between singers, if that makes sense, rather
Yeah.
than just saying which would be more typical. And sorry, I'll let you come in a sec. Rather than saying a lot of the time it's just he's a gifted singer and I'm not, or this, this person's got no talent, like they're a write-off type, more like the more typical type of attitude you'll see on, a lot of the X Factor type shows, where it's like you either got it or you haven't type mentality.
Yeah, and I think that can be a bit dangerous. And also, they pit people against each other in terms of like who's got the chair or whatever. And really, the way to success is don't focus on anyone else.
Yeah.
And that is easier said than done. But the minute you can do the look in the mirror, that's your competition, rather than constantly wandering around looking at other people. You find that distraction of looking around at what everyone else is doing all the time will just cause you to not fulfill your potential most of the time. So that would be my thoughts on that. But then also I have a thought of, just to be deep for a second, of you got to be careful of success as well, because it's like, well, what is this success? Is it your version of success again, or is it other people's success, or what they think success is? Or are you worried about if they think you're successful, or blah de blah de blah?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, right now, Carl, if I had to ask you, do you feel successful? I don't know what the answer would be, but point is, it's sort of a choice to whether you. Do you know what I mean? I think David Phelps is very successful. Is he commercially successful? No, but I think he's very successful.
It depends by what standard you're measuring it is. I guess is partly what you're trying to get across, and it's I completely agree. In terms of myself, if I ask myself, am I a success relative to where I started, relative to where I want to get to as a singer, I'd say like this year I'm becoming a success personally. But like I've still got a lot of things that I'm like, I wish I could do that a little bit more consistently.
Yeah.
But now I kind of know when it doesn't work, I know why, and I know like I don't stress about it because I know there's a certain process and I have to just go through it, and it takes time and you can't get round it. Like you can't cheat your way to great singing. You basically have to go through the same process as everyone else has. Now that process might be easy or difficult depending on the journey you've gone through up to that point and when you started, and if you have other instruments you've picked up before you start singing, this kind of thing. But ultimately the process is the same. It's just and so I understand more the process and where I fit into that. But the when I think about David Phelps, he's a success in the sense that his ability is extremely high. There's probably a handful of 5 or 10 people in the world that can maybe sing at that particular level. So in that sense, yeah. Compared to, I guess if you were thinking about comparing him to an athlete, like a basketball player or a track and field athlete, he's somebody that is at the highest level of skill. But as we were talking about earlier, like just because you're at the highest level of skill doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to earn a fortune singing, because there's a lot of other variables in singing. It's not just your overall ability; it is a lot of other things. And so, and yeah, I guess I've kind of lost my train of thought a bit there, but
one thing I'll say as well is that clients often will mix up success and happiness. And they'll go, well, when I just get into drama school, then I'll feel successful, then I'll be happy. Or when I just get that tour, if I just get in the chorus of the West End, and then it's like, oh, but I'm in the chorus. If I just get first cover, if I just get the part, if I just get on Broadway, and it's never ending, and you can chase it, and it becomes addictive in a funny way. And I think you've always got to appreciate where you're at, and sounds weird, but love the journey. It's true. That's why I'm doing this on my own, and as well, and and I know that when in 10 years time, when we're fully booked coaches and doing this, that, and the other, we will look back at this time when we were starting out, we were hungry, and we'll wish that we would come back to this, even if we have all this success in the future. I'm telling you, man.
I know what you mean. It's you kind of get in your. It's kind of well, you get a lot of. You learn so much from having to struggle, and whilst you hate struggling, there's a certain amount that you basically need it to grow as a person, and I mean, singing in that sense mirrors life because even for great singers, they are struggling all the time just to maintain where they're at to keep that high level of skill and ability. Like they're having to struggle, not necessarily in the way another singer's struggling, but they will still be working constantly to sing at a high level, and all of that struggle, really, like you say, that's what keeps it fun, even though it's what we tend to hate. I mean, I remember embodying what you were saying a moment ago.
I love the process, love the
Yeah,
failure. You gotta
when
love
I
it.
when I started, in my head for years it was, if I can become a good singer, then I'll be happy.
And then you became a good singer, and then it's like, well, then what?
Yeah,
And if
and you
and you
realise it's
on
nothing.
YouTube, well, once I get X amount of subscribers, or once I get this, and it's never ending, and I'm all about the process and enjoying that. And this leads into the iceberg again. It was all about the failures as well, and enjoying the failure, and realizing that you're learning, realizing that you're growing, realizing that it's necessary. Um,
Yeah,
and
I had a last December. I had a show that was one of the I just the most frustrating shows I've ever done, to be honest. In the sense that I'd probably been singing about 8 or 9 years. It didn't go well, and it really sent me back to the drawing board as a singer completely. And it haunts me, that show. A year later, it still haunts me in a sense. But the reason that I've moved forward this year was largely because of that show, and so
yeah, you fix
it's
it.
like a blessing in disguise because that's what I think. Actually, you had this nice little article I read, um, and it was about different types of motivation. I think it actually
Oh yeah.
resonated with me a lot because I saw both types in my mind. I think it was motivation because of the fear, and then the other one was motivation because of a vision in the future that you have, or
Yeah,
something
I
like
talk
that.
about sometimes like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. The extrinsic is I'm gonna do all these skills so that I get that one job, and the intrinsic is I'm gonna keep going being a singer no matter what because it's pulling me. I haven't got a choice. Whether you won the lottery or not now, well, you might have a nice, like I might have a nice studio in Covent Garden, but I'll be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm not choosing to do this to get to that one goal or get to that one thing. It's I'm motivated from the inside out, and that's a place to be.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that technique can bring to people is that it starts to help you sift through and separate out singing as a skill that can be developed versus the all the stylistic stuff that we want to do as singers. And once you can split that, it's much easier to become intrinsically motivated because you can start to understand, oh, okay, the reason I can't do that is because I'm not quite skilled enough in this particular area. And then the motivation becomes, I want to be better at this. Whereas a lot of if you have a more typical mindset with singing, I guess, of you're kind of born with it more or you're not born with it type mentality, it's very hard to intrinsically motivate yourself because there's nothing to latch onto because you either have it or you don't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
harder to get that intrinsic motivation. A lot of my motivation comes from pretty much I don't want to suck, and I'm so scared of sucking that I practice all the time.
yeah,
And the other one is from the very start, I had this sense of exactly where I wanted to end up as a singer.
yeah,
Uh, and that end point really is is where I've been heading for. But I kind of had both for a long time. I have less of the fear now and more of this kind of overall broader vision of where I'm going. But that end point, I always had this sense of an end point or this sense of what I wanted to become. And then I also had the fear. I think what I remember just when I was looking up to get some info for this chat. I remember in my head thinking, I kind of have I kind of had both of those going on, and I hadn't even really realised or thought about it that much before. And I can imagine if one of those is lacking, and I actually see this with a lot of singers, is they don't really have a sense of where they want to end up, and
Oh,
I think that can be really tricky because I don't understand it because in my mind from day one I knew where I wanted to, I had this very clear picture in my mind,
yeah.
and and but if you've got no sense of where you want to end up, it can be like hard to I can imagine it being hard to motivate yourself to practice to because where are you going?
Yeah,
Do you know what
exactly.
I
The
mean?
clearer the vision, the better. Like we respond well as humans to just a really clear vision. If I say, "Oh well, I'll be out now, Carl. I'll come back later," you'll say, "Well, what time?" I'll just say, "Oh well, later." Or if I say, "Well, I just want to hit higher," well, I just want to hit higher. I just want to be better, or whatever. It can't be that. It's too unspecific. It's got to be something so clear. It's crazy.
Mm,
So what I'll do with my clients as well, I'll make 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year goals, literally, and I'll
mm,
map out where we're at, where we were, how we're going to get there, and that is the difference is crazy.
mm.
You
That's
know,
actually interesting because it's not something I've done with my students, but it's
I
definitely a good
send
idea.
everyone a consultation after first. I map out everything I heard, what exercise I did with them and stuff. And I talk about goals. I talk about a clear vision. I write down, you want to be in the West, I want to be in the West End. What parts do you want to play? Name me 5 parts you want to play that are in the West End right now. Stuff like
Mm,
that,
mm.
because a lot of it, if it's, well, I just want to be better, it doesn't do anything like something. And, the clearer, the better. Like, what part is it? How long are you going to do it for? When are you going to be on stage? And to be fair, I did this with New York Vocal Coaching and managed to get the job, and David Phelps and managed to be assistant producer, and Brett Manning as well, and managed to, be out with him in Italy for a week. It's if you really commit to that idea that's so specific,
Mm.
then that clear goal will be so much more easy to achieve. We're very visual animals, so that vision that will be the intrinsic motivator every day, as you said.
Mm. Yeah, and there has to be something that drives you because singing is it can be whilst it's very fun and obviously people want to do it. There's also the work that goes into it, which
Yeah,
takes time and there's no way around. You're going to have to be singing every day. You're going to have to be doing a lot of it. A lot of it's motor working on motor skills, improving motor skills is can be pretty dry work. It's not necessarily as exciting as people envision when they
yeah,
kind of
and
get into it.
it's going to be a hard journey. So the only way you're going to get through it, as Steve Jobs says, is if you absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Like I finish a day of coaching now, like 6, 7 hours, and I'm like, oh, that was great. Just got to have a bit of a play, a bit of fun. I mean, obviously I take it seriously, but it doesn't feel like work at all. And you've got to be in that. It's got to be something that's within you and you just have to do it anyway. I could be making 10 grand a year, 20 grand a year. I could be successful or not. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to be doing it. I'm still going to be reading my vocal science books tonight and no one's going to stop me because I want to. And it's a hard journey and you have to be, has to be your number one passion as well.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I do agree. As much as the there has to be something that propels you to do all that work, and like you say, the love. I uh,
And it's
I
not
have
worth
this.
it. You asked like Ronnie O'Sullivan, sorry to interrupt, the other
Yeah,
day. Someone said, "Oh, what does it feel like to win another thing? Isn't it worth all the hard work for this moment?" And he said, "No. If you'd have asked me all them hours and over all them years, it's about the process, the journey. I wish I could go back to that guy again who was 21, who was young, who was hungry. If I'd have gone through all that just to be here for this one moment, I wouldn't have done it.
yeah,
It's because I loved the struggle. I loved the failure. I loved the journey. I loved
mm.
when someone put me down and I said, no, I'm going to do this."
Yeah. There's something that battle,
Yeah.
that battle within yourself, and the battle you can feel like you're kind of having with the world in front of you. A lot of like that battle is like real. Do you know what I mean? It's a real thing that you're having to kind of go through and develop as a person to go through. And that really, like, coaching, singing, and you know, anything, if you're starting a business or whatever it is, that really is what helps people to become really great. Not necessarily in singing, but just great as individuals. Because there's nothing that really teaches you. You know, you learn a lot at school, you learn this, that, and the other, but there's nothing that teaches you like the world just basically saying F off, and you having to just say, I'm just going to go anywhere and see where this leads. Because you just grow. You
And
grow in like your ability to communicate, your ability to make things work, to find a way no matter what, because this is my path.
yeah, and you know, without being too heavy, I think the health thing helped me do that. So if I ever did have fear of failure or anything, you then, you know, after you've been in hospital or whatever, you put it in the perspective of, God, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? I'll crack. I'll not get the
Yeah.
job. And when you have that real something to bounce off of, that's why a great book, if anyone wants to read it, is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, showing that failure, because we're relating it back to the iceberg because I go off on one, failure is the way to success. That is the exact way. And the worst thing you can do is not do anything. The worst thing, you know, that
Yeah.
we're putting ourselves out on YouTube, and it's obviously not a big deal. Everyone does it, but still, a few years ago, I would have really been struggling to do this because if someone writes, "Oh, you know what, Chris said this, and he doesn't know what he's talking about,"
Yeah.
I would have really struggled with that. But now,
Yeah. Now it seems like
there's no
nothing.
comments like that though. But still, like it just is what it is. I've got no choice. I've got to do my own thing. You've got to put yourself out there. And that's the only way. It's the only way.
Yeah, the only way is through a lot of failure. Like actually, it's a good example with the videos, because even like this year I've got much more comfortable on camera. But for I mean I was doing little videos here and there on this channel for years, and it took me a long time to just get comfortable in front of a camera. And now it's like nothing. But people don't realize even just something like that. You know, starting a YouTube channel. Can be very difficult when you start it. More difficult than it can appear when you've never done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you know over time it doesn't feel like much of anything. It's just another video on YouTube. But
And it feels the same with being on stage. So singer's advice, get on stage. Oh,
yeah,
but I'm not ready, or I haven't got my songs, or I haven't got my technique. Absolutely not, get on stage.
yeah, just get it
Figure out.
done.
Yeah. Sometimes, you know, we can theorize and we're like this with vocal science. We can pick everything apart. What's vibrating at 440 times here, or which, you know, and sometimes you just gotta let it go.
Definitely, and I
And
think
that goes into the iceberg thing as well.
yeah, and I mean, a lot of really good singers who know nothing about any of this. I think a lot of the times one of the reasons they're good at what they do is because they're not worried about any of all this abstract stuff.
So
They
true.
just sit there and do some singing, and it's no big deal. Just you know, just like a kid playing with their toys. It's like
Yeah, I mean, everyone's a bit afraid of getting on stage and failing, and what will other people say? But that's grown up in society. But if a kid took that attitude, well, they'd never learn to walk.
I
How
know,
many, you know, how many times they fail when but they don't care. You
yeah,
know, they love exploring, and that's a great mindset to have.
yeah,
Um,
certainly. Because you know, it take a kid like 6 months to learn to walk. 6 months of falling over, like over and over again. And
yeah,
walking is hard. And you're absolutely right. The It's funny though, with some things, people are a lot more. Uh, that type of mindset is a lot more normal. Like in sport, it will be more normal, but in singing, it's less like that. We have to talk about it like this. Whereas in a sport, somebody you give someone a tennis racket, immediately they're going to assume I need to learn to play tennis from the start. And I think I kind of emphasize this a lot because the predominant pattern of thinking is not so much in that direction. It is some, but I think with singing for some reason it's a little bit more towards, you know, I got to get this. I should be able to do this naturally
yeah.
now.
But it should be the same. I mean, I think you mentioned we're like vocal athletes. That's how I think of it.
Yeah,
And
because
people are like, you know, how often should I work out, or how often do you go to the gym? 4 times a week, do that. You know,
Yeah.
don't do it absolutely every day, maybe, because you probably wouldn't go to the gym absolutely every day. Do it for maybe 45 minutes as you would any other muscle. But also have a go at clients sometimes who they'll say, "Oh, I'm a singer," and then they won't practice too much in between lessons, but they'll always be in the gym. And I'll say, "Well, are you a singer or are you a gym goer? What's your priority? You've got to treat it the same. You can't go to the gym for an hour and then not do your skills. You've got to do your skills for an hour. The gym goers go to the gym for an hour. You know, you do your skills for an hour. But people don't quite think of it exactly the same. How many pro singers, how many gym athletes, bodybuilders, whatever, are going to the gym 5 times a week? All of them. How many pro singers are sitting down 5 times a week for 45 minutes and rigorously going through it, changing up the workouts every month? You know, we'll do head voice month 1, we'll do chest voice month 2, and then the next week we'll do a mix, and the next week we'll just do light. Just as you would muscle confusion with the thing, we'll do upper body, lower body, we'll do just bis and tris, we'll just do, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
How
exactly.
people think about it like that?
Yeah, that's actually a good analogy and completely accurate. The you the thing is with motor skills. I've been looking into this a little bit because I'm interested in basketball and I watch players and stuff and watching about this guy called Steph Curry who when he was at college he reworked his jump shot motion basically one summer, which took him a few months to do, and the long and short of it was that when he started the change in the mechanics, he couldn't shoot from more than like a few feet away from the basket for about 3 weeks. But,
Okay.
it took him, and he was out there every day for hours. But the the thing about establishing motor skills is that if you're doing it every day and it's repeatable and consistent, that's what's wiring this to this, and that how consistent that is, and how much it's done is what makes that connection as strong as possible and as reliable as possible, and
Yeah.
as it gives you the ability to trust it. If you're not doing it as much, and the practice isn't going to be as consistent day in day out, because if you're practicing every 2, 3, 4 days, when you come back to it after 3 days, the motion that you start isn't going to be as similar because there's been a longer amount of time. And the smaller amount of time that you've got between the right motion and the next time you do it, the less chance there is of it drifting, basically.
Yeah.
And
And
that drift can happen over, say, so for learning singers, what happens is they get it right with a coach and then they drift over a period of maybe 2 or 3 months to something that's completely off again, and the coach has to bring them back. So the more that you can really, great practices, get it right every single day exactly the same, and that makes this super consistent connection between your mind and your voice where you can let go and you trust it. But it's so key that this is why the consistent practice is so key, because there's something real behind it. There's a real logical reason behind why
no,
it's
it's
so key.
neurological pathways, and that's how muscle memory gets built in, and all that sciencey stuff.
Hmm.
And it is that, and I will do that, and I will also mix it up on purpose, which is back to what we were saying. What Adele needed, she was a bodybuilder who was just doing chest day, you know, in the gym all the time, as in just doing that one register really well. So she needed to mix it up to be a complete athlete. And
Yeah.
that's what I will do with registers and also exercises. Just one fun thing before, because I'm taking up all your time, but it would be that I did a week seminar in Copenhagen and Norway and stuff. And and even when I'm teaching now, I'll never do the same exercise twice,
Hmm.
which is weird. But I'll try not to. I will have my core exercises, especially for warm-ups like the gym. But after that, I will be present in the room and I will just try and make up an individual exercise for them in the moment, um,
That's
which is
pretty cool.
the gym analogy again, which is harder work, but it's better for me and it's better for the student. It's better for me because I find that a lot of teachers, we're going off track here, but I just want to say it's a lot of teachers when I
We can
have
kind of
them.
We
What,
can
sorry?
kind of you can kind of include this in closing thoughts, really. So just carry on.
Yeah, I found that, I aspire to be a great coach, and that's why Justin inspired me. And he would never do, I must have worked with him for 3 years. I never heard the same exercise twice.
Mm.
And so sort of learning from him of how to approach it. So I will try and approach it the same gym way, because when I was going to coaches, if we're going to be doing this 30 years, some of them are just so bored. Because everyone's coming in the room and they just do, right, exercise 1, lip rolls, exercise 2, and then no matter who comes in, do the same thing. And so I constantly try and be present, and I'll hear a sound and then I'll go, right, where do I want the larynx? Where do I want the mouth shape? Where do I want the compression? Where do I want this? And then I'll think of something off the top of my head. I'll normally sit there for 20 seconds and then I'll come up with something. And I find that approach as well, a bit like the very personal trainer is the best approach to a voice. Just as a different thought, we've gone from the
Mm.
iceberg.
No, it's okay. And I found in lessons sometimes different exercises just won't do what I'm trying to get across, and I'll find some funny combination that fixes a couple
Yeah,
of things that are going off, and just kind of create an exercise out of it on the fly. And I've found that sometimes that's worked loads, because you know a lot of the rules that we talk about, or we say, oh, this exercise helps this and this exercise helps that, a lot of the time it's true in most cases, but it can be completely untrue in another. Goog is a good example. Goog is, supposed to help core closure, but Goog for me was so difficult when I started. And for me to find closure, that wouldn't necessarily have helped me. There was other ways that, in
yeah,
my mind, I managed to get there, and then later on I came back to the Goog. But the point I'm getting across is sometimes we have these expectations of an exercise, or of something, and whilst it will apply 90% of the time, you'll get plenty of singers that will not help, and in fact it'll probably lead them more further in the wrong direction than the right one. And if you're looking at people as individuals, you
yeah,
pick up on these things more. But if you're trying to kind of create this one size fits all method, you're going to lose some of that tailoring, is I
yeah,
guess what I'm
yeah,
trying to get across. And obviously that is the compromise you make when you buy a program versus when you get a coach, because with a coach you've got more chance of some of that tailoring, whereas with a program it has to be a one size fits all by design. But yeah, I quite like what you said there, because it's kind of given me some ideas in terms of things that paths I might go down when I'm working with students some as well, which is a nice thing. Um, I struggle with because of my own journey. I struggle with sometimes trying to, and I think all coaches struggle with this because it's very hard, trying to understand exactly like where someone is at. Because I found that one student will get so much and take so much for granted and will immediately get things,
mm,
and then other students, it'll be like they can't, so you have to go back further and further until you find where they kind of can
yeah,
get grasp onto something and build up from there. But sometimes I find their journey so different to mine that it's really hard for me to figure out like where are they at, because they do this one thing that I could never do for years. They do it like nothing, and then there's something else that I picked up immediately that they cannot do. And so they've got these things like they can do this that I couldn't do, but they've got this that I could do that they can't do. Like, and trying to figure out like how on earth have they done it the other way around? Like, how have they got it backwards? How have they learnt it in a completely different way
yeah,
to me? It's hard to latch onto that, because as a coach you've got 10 minutes really before you get into the lesson. You've got 10-15 minutes to try and latch onto something that you can help them with. And then after that, if you've not found it, you can kind of be in no man's land a little bit if you're not careful. So, um, like as a coach, being able to latch onto how do I tailor what we're doing for this individual? How do I latch onto their journey very quickly? That's to me, it's probably been the hardest skill to develop as a
yeah.
coach, because it's
It's
a
not like figure
challenge.
out their voice right away. I'll run some tests. I'll
Mm,
have an inkling that this person's not got that register, or not got that note, or not got, or that this is about where they'll do it. So I'll run some tests.
See what happens and then
Yeah, so if I'm not
diagnose.
sure if
Yeah.
that's like a connected light voice or a disconnect, if I'm not sure if they're cheating on this or that, I'll put them in a few hard situations which normally they don't like, and then I'll be able to work out exactly what's going on
Mm,
then. But yeah,
that's interesting. Um, right. Well, I guess I'll say thank you. I need to shoot. I've got other things to do today, but
no, we've been on a while, but it's been great. I've loved it.
this has been really good. If people want to follow what you're doing, you kind of, I think you said you're going to start a YouTube channel at some
Yeah, I'm
point.
gonna start the YouTube channel.
But where can
So
they get hold of you on your Facebook and things? I'll put a link in the
that's probably the
description.
best. Yeah, Facebook, Christopher David Mitchell. I think it's Chris David Mitch, vocal coach. That's where
Yeah.
I do the most work, but I'm gonna start doing the YouTube. Yeah.
Cool. And you're based in London at the minute, like I am. So.
In London, I will be in from January again. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And we can meet.
Um,
And I just want to say thanks for this, and also that I like what you're doing, because as we know, the vocal coach world can be very dogmatic at times and very this, that, and the other. And someone will ask me, "Oh, what do you think of blah blah, coach?" And I'll generally say, unless I think something's going wrong, that I like other coaches. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to help singers. I've only got about 25 hours in my week, to teach students. I'm not worried, like this is fine. And the fact that, we can do this and talk about it, I think is the right way that the sort of community should be going, rather than, arguing online about terms and this, that, and the other.
yeah. Well, that's actually a good place to finish because I've kind of gone through a journey this year where my content changed a lot, and now I've gone back to just trying, and that's really the purpose of these. Is I'm trying to reach out to coaches and just
Right.
have chats for an hour or so, find common ground, and start to do something in the right way more again. So yeah, I appreciate the time you've given us today, Christopher. I'm sure people will get a lot from this, and I guess we'll leave it at that. I'll put some links in the description, and I'm sure we will see you again. And that's all
Good.
really.
Thanks, man.
Cool, man. Thank you.